This video is called Why Comedy Movies Died.
Comedy movies have been dead for the past decade, which is especially depressing because Hollywood stopped making funny movies when we needed them the most. The past 10 years have been some of the most chaotic and divided times in modern history. Politics taking over literally everything, cost of living skyrocketing, and people spending hours online doom scrolling an infinite feed of bad news. If there was ever a time we needed to collectively sit in a theater and just laugh at something stupid, it's now. But it wasn't always like this. During the 90s and early 2000s, we were getting multiple hilarious comedy films each year. I bet you forgot how stacked the year 2004 was. Anchorman, White Chicks, Dodgeball.
Yeah, I feel like when I was a kid, there was a lot of like funny little movies, like all the time. So it's weird, like I don't know what happened to them.
Mean Girls, Napoleon Dynamite, all in the same year. If we got one movie as funny as any of these in the past 5 years, we would be grateful. But this isn't even just an opinion. The data doesn't lie. 2016 was the official point of no return for comedy films. In that year, comedies made up about 12% of the domestic box office and pulled in $1.1 billion. Just 1 year later, their share was nearly cut in half to 7%, with gross revenue dropping to $790 million, making it the single biggest 1 year collapse on record. After that, it was all downhill. 2022 was particularly abysmal, with the entire genre of comedy grossing $259 million. That is an entire year of movies that grossed less than just what The Hangover did in 2009. So what happened to comedy films after 2016? Well, there are a few things we have to consider, but it all boils down to one major reason. And today we are going to discuss everything, starting with how Hollywood lost the creativity that we used to see in small, medium, and high-budget comedy films.
Now all we see in movies is just retakes of like old stuff, but there's nothing like new. So I don't know what's going on in Hollywood, but yeah.
The beauty of comedy is that it's boundaryless. Unlike drama, kind of action, or even horror, it doesn't really need to play by any established rules. A comedy can start with literally anything: a talking animal, a man stuck in a time loop, a dodgeball tournament, a pair of clueless detectives, and turn it into a creative masterpiece. The premise doesn't have to be realistic. It doesn't even have to make any sense. As long as it's funny, it works. Take Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, for example. What a unique concept. A private investigator who specializes in finding lost animals and solves crimes through pure chaos and speaks almost entirely in one-liners. At one point, he's literally crawling out of a rhino's ass. Then again, Jim Carrey was kind of a cheat code for 90s comedies. Films like The Mask and Liar Liar.
That was disgusting, by the way. Yeah.
Liar showcased his ability to immerse us into the most ridiculous plots imaginable. Carrey had this cartoon-like elasticity. He could bend and contort his face and body, which made even the dumbest scenes or dialogue unforgettable. Or what about Dumb and Dumber, which is literally just a movie about two dumbasses?
You go straight ahead and you make the left over the bridge.
That's a lovely accent you have. New Jersey?
Austria.
Austria! Well then, good night.
Have you guys seen what's been going on with Jim Carrey, by the way? Like, he just popped out from wherever he was after years of not really being like seen, and like no one recognizes him. This is random. I'm just saying, like, people thought he was like a clone. They thought he was a clone. They thought he was like, he had a mask on just because he looked kind of weird. I also thought he looked a little weird, but like what can I can't say anything. Like, it's him. But yeah, it's just funny. Seeing him in all of these old videos reminds me of that. Like, reminds me of like the fact that he's kind of trending right now for how he looks. Yeah.
Good day, mate. Let's put another shrimp on the barbie.
I always found myself gravitating towards films that had insanely unrealistic plots. The kind of movies where the world they're in doesn't follow society's rules or any rules at all. When there's no logic to be broken and the possibilities are endless. Like, literally anything can happen. The Hangover took this concept to the absolute maximum. At its core, it's just a bachelor party gone wrong. Something that in real life might just end with a bad hangover and some embarrassing photos. But in this world, it spirals into a mystery involving a missing groom, a stolen police car, a baby in the closet, Mike Tyson's tiger, and a mob boss named Mr. Chow. It's an escalating chain of ridiculous events where every new reveal is crazier.
That Asian actor, I love him. I feel like he's in all of those funny movies. There's like a group of actors that they always use for this kind of movie, like that type of movie. And I don't know his name, but I love him. He's so funny.
Crazier than the last, and because the movie establishes early on that anything can happen, you never question it. In Anchorman, the 1970s news industry is less about journalism and more about ego wars that escalate into literal deadly combat between rival news teams. Compete with tridents, horses, and someone catching on fire, and then casually returning to work like nothing happened. Anchorman is the perfect example of a comedy movie that dedicates almost all of its dialogue to do one very important thing: make you laugh.
Brian, I'm going to be honest with you. That smells like pure gasoline.
They've done studies, 60% of the time, it works every time.
That doesn't make sense.
The amount of quotable lines in this movie is unprecedented. It was even unique back then, but now, maybe you'd be lucky to get one or two quotables in a comedy movie. Dodgeball is about a Las Vegas dodgeball tournament for fully grown adults with a prize big enough to save a failing gym.
If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
What?
They get their asses handed to them by a bunch of Girl Scouts, experiment with some interesting uniform styles, and Ben Stiller is in this film doing what he does best, playing the role of the villain. And what about Ted, which asks you to accept, without hesitation, that a man's childhood teddy bear came to life, grew up with him, drinks, does drugs, and gets into full-blown relationships. And these are just some of the ultra-mainstream movies. Don't even get me started on Pootie Tang and Don't Be a Menace to South Central while drinking your juice in the hood. These are movies that are so absurd that you have to make sure you watch them with people who have the same humor as you, otherwise they'll look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah, like these movies are actually very niche. One of my favorite movies, I don't know if it's in the same category, but This Is the End with James Franco and all the other guys. My fave. Oh my gosh, I loved that movie. I don't know if it's the same category, but I'm kind of seeing some of the same actors. And yeah, I really did like that genre, but I don't know what happened to it.
There are very few comedies today that keep the spirit of this insane absurdity. However, Cocaine Bear is one that does come to mind, which is about an American black bear that eats a stash of cocaine that fell out of a plane smuggling drugs. The bear becomes highly aggressive, attacking and trying to kill hikers in its way. While the movie is just alright, I do respect the dumbness of this idea. It's not trying to be relatable, it's just leaning fully into a ridiculous premise and committing to the bit, and that's something we don't nearly get enough of anymore. Most modern comedy movies take the safe route. We get movies like Vacation Friends 2, a generic sequel with the same recycled concept of a holiday gone wrong and being...
I think it's just, honestly, what we're seeing right now, it looks like it's just it's just the effect of how the world is right now. I feel like since people and everyone is so like they have a stick up their ass, it's just that they have to make comedy very vanilla, because everyone's gonna get offended. So it's giving very much that.
Stuck surrounded by people with clashing personalities. Or The Man from Toronto, another Kevin Hart buddy comedy that is so formulaic it feels like it was designed for people to turn on and then fall asleep while the ads run. Comedies rarely go for absurd humor these days because, well, it's really difficult. Too open of a canvas can make it harder to build a story with structure. The freedom to do anything also means there's nothing stopping you from literally losing the plot, which is kind of what happened in Cocaine Bear. However, other great comedy films in the past started with a lightly realistic framework.
Okay, I'm gonna check out anything that anyone sends me in the reacts in my Discord after.
Framework which only enhanced the absolute farce that took place during the film. Like Super Troopers, a movie about morally questionable cops. Sure, that sounds realistic, until you realize these highway patrol officers spend more time pranking civilians and messing with each other than actually enforcing the law. They behave in a way that doesn't even come close to representing reality, and none of them would still have jobs after these antics. But at the same time, it does make you think some cops might actually act like that in private. Or the 40-year-old virgin. Sure, it's very possible that a man could abstain or just not have the opportunity to have sex for half their life. And if you found that out, you might think, wow, that's interesting, and then move on. But the movie takes that basic believable premise and pushes it into pure absurdity. It then turns into all of Steve Carell's co-workers dedicating their entire lives to getting him laid. And of course, stepbrothers. I have a stepbrother, tons of people have step siblings. It's an extremely relatable experience, navigating new family dynamics and sharing space with someone you didn't grow up with. But in the film, nothing about that is relatable. We have two 40-year-old men with no jobs that spend their days building bunk beds, hanging out in a treehouse, and fighting like toddlers.
I didn't touch a drum set, okay?
I witnessed with my eyes your testicles touching my drum set.
All right, that's it!
A modern version of this absurd but also still upholding a slight realistic framework is the teen comedy movie Bottoms, which is basically just another silly high school movie, but through the lens of two queer students. The high school jocks in the film wear their full padded football uniforms 24/7, in class, at parties, while sleeping. It's obviously unrealistic, but it's a funny way of critiquing jocks that dedicate their entire personality to the sport they play. Oh, and a nice touch was throwing one of them in a cage in the classroom for absolutely no reason.
Try telling Dimitri Walker that. Little mother came the first week and I ain't.
You don't think you could ever watch a comedy movie unless it's with like the huzz? You okay?
Seen him since.
Dimitri Walker committed suicide the first week of school, Mr. G.
Sure he did.
The reason why most comedy films today feel like they are missing that ultra creative touch, at least according to legendary director and producer Judd Apatow, is because comedy writers these days are just less funny.
Oh my gosh, I've heard that name before. Judd Apatow, I've seen it several times. That's so interesting. I've never seen him, but I know that name.
Just less funny. He said, when you make the list of the best movies of all time, you're always going to put Airplane on it. And if movies like that aren't being made right now, it's because people aren't smart enough and funny enough to make them. Okay, so who would be smart enough or funny enough to write a modern masterpiece? Well, I've noticed that comedy films today seem to be missing actual comedians. And that's because some of the funniest and most popular comedians today are opting for something much easier and more profitable: podcasts. Before podcasts became wildly popular, comedians had essentially three routes to earn a career: get a job on Saturday Night Live, secure a TV sitcom, or get a role in a comedy film. The mainstream visibility earned through these avenues allowed comedians to fill seats in comedy clubs across the country.
Wait, you said, why would I watch boring people pretend to be funny when I can watch Dave Chappelle? I mean, the people that are on the movies are oftentimes they're comedians, so they are funny. They are like actually funny. Most of them. I don't really find Dave Chappelle that funny. He's more like a preacher to me.
Vast majority of the comedians responsible for your favorite comedy films were originally platformed by SNL. Eddie Murphy, Bill Murray, Will Ferrell, Mike Myers, Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, Kristen Wiig. I could keep going on and on. It was much easier for a current or ex-SNL cast member to pitch a movie to a major studio because they have already proven to the
I know, I feel like that's kind of like a crazy take, but I just don't find him that funny. Like, he's like, okay, maybe you're not funny because the greatest comedian of our time. Maybe you have a type of subjective humor that's unique. Maybe.
proven to the industry that they are funny. So when these comedians began to see success in films in the 2000s, they assisted in casting other comedy actors with a ton of potential. Actors like Jonah Hill, Zach Galifianakis, Paul Rudd, Vince Vaughn, Melissa McCarthy, Steve...
Hold on. To answer your question, who's my favorite comedian? I keep forgetting his name, but he's Italian. And I don't know if it's Jeremy or Anthony, but it's like he has a long last name. He's really funny. But yeah, that's one of them.
McCarthy, Steve Carell were able to skip over SNL and go straight to the big screen. And it sounds painfully obvious to say, but I think a large reason why older films were funnier was because the funniest people at the time were either writing or acting in these comedy films. Today, a comedian doesn't need SNL or a comedy film to determine their potential for a comedy career. All they need is a podcast. If you can be funny for an hour a week behind a microphone, clip the best moments for TikTok or Instagram, and build a loyal audience online, you can skip Hollywood entirely and still sell out theaters on a national tour. I'm sure Theo Von could assist in writing or acting.
So you're telling me all the comedians are going for for podcasting instead of like movies? I don't know. Like, why would they do that? I feel like movies is such a fun concept. Like, why wouldn't you want to do movies as a comedian? Why do you say Dave is preachy? I kind of agree. Because that's what it feels like. I feel like I'm at church. I feel like he's just preaching me his views. And it's not like, I don't know. I feel like he obviously fits an older crowd. And like, I'm not saying he's not funny, but he's just not, I just don't find him like hilarious. He's just like, yeah, sure, I guess. But it's not really my cup of tea. Podcast is like the OF for comedians, literally. Podcasts are free to make and pull in a lot of money. Yeah, I guess, but it's not, I don't know. That's like a whole industry in and of itself.
In a really funny movie if he tried, but why would he? With podcast ad revenue, Patreon subscribers, and live show ticket sales selling out all over the country, a lot of comics are making more money than they ever could from starring in a studio comedy without months of shooting, studio interference, or the risk of a box office flop. This shift is a huge win for independent comedians.
I should make a podcast? No.
Comedians, but a huge loss for comedy films. The performers who would have once been fighting to star in the next Step Brothers or The Hangover are now trying to get a spot on the Joe Rogan podcast or be interviewed by Theo Von. They don't need to spend years chasing a studio deal, and they don't have to share their earnings with a production company. It's a double-edged sword. On one hand, we can now hear from our favorite funny person every single week, sometimes multiple times a week, without waiting years for them to land a movie role. But the trade-off is that we don't get these larger-than-life, culturally defining moments that comedy films used to create. Nobody is quoting a podcast episode 15 years later the way people still quote Anchorman or Superbad. Well, except this one.
My mother.
It's true. I actually would rather hear my favorite comedian weekly on a podcast than seeing them like once every few years in a movie. In that aspect, I understand that, but it's just that like, I don't know. It's just like there's a huge lack of like funny movies now. It's like that used to be something I used to love to watch and I grew up on. Old and obsolete cable, like a TV, wired TV are not floating. Like, and you can also interact with them. Yeah, no, like I feel like they should still keep space for comedy movies. They definitely should.
My mother's very pretty.
She's a beautiful woman.
Unlike your cross-eyed mother.
Well, you don't have to.
I'm not Bobby Mother. I'm Bobby Mom.
And another big reason behind the decline of comedy films, as predictable as it is, I know, but we have to talk about cancel culture, because there are some components of this that make it a real factor. I think it goes without saying that most jokes these days receive backlash when they touch on political or social issues, but comedians have incorporated political undertones in their work for decades. Stand-up legends like Richard Pryor and George Carlin have long pushed boundaries and tackled sensitive topics like race, war, religion, gender, and government policies. The biggest difference is that in earlier eras, their controversial material was more likely to be seen as a part of their artistic persona rather than something to be taken literally. The same thing went for comedy movies. People generally understood that jokes were just jokes, with no intention of doing any actual.
Yeah, exactly. Like jokes were just jokes. People are different now. I don't know. We have a whole new generation of humans. And it's just completely different, and people get offended and mad, and they just don't take things funny anymore. So I think that's the biggest issue, is just because humanity as a whole is just in a different chapter. Maybe like there's like a pendulum, so maybe we're gonna go back to doing all the stuff that we used to do before, but right now we're like at the extreme end of like, don't joke about anything or we're getting offended, and then they're gonna, yeah, it's just not fun. It's not really fun. Yeah, that was Dave. He's cool. He's cool.
Harm. Then again, societal norms just simply change. And a lot of people today feel that making jokes or making light of very sensitive issues or topics is just not okay. We should not be joking about these things. The 1981 comedy movie Porky's involves male characters spying on naked female students. This was then treated as harmless fun, but now recognized as harassment. The 1984 comedy Revenge of the Nerds includes a disturbing scene where a character disguises himself to trick a woman into sex, something that would now be recognized as rape, not humor. The 1994 film Ace Ventura: Pet Detective has been widely criticized in recent years for the way it mocks a trans woman. The 2001 comedy Shallow Hal centers on the idea that an overweight woman is only seen as attractive through hypnosis, promoting harmful stereotypes. 2007's Norbit has been criticized for its offensive portrayal of black women. The character Rasputia is depicted as an aggressive, loud, violent, hypersexual, and domineering woman. And there's even a scene in Step Brothers that makes unapologetic jokes about white supremacy and Nazism. Chances are, if you rewatched any comedy film you loved in the past, you'll find a joke that either aged poorly or maybe you just don't think it's funny anymore. That's normal. And it may seem like these jokes or premises were okay in the past and people didn't care as much, but that's not necessarily the case either. They just did not have the platform to express their opinions. Social media has given literally anyone and everyone a platform to express immediate feedback and criticism, and this is a blessing and a curse. I and many other YouTubers literally benefit from this modern social media climate. We have no superiors that are controlling our opinions, deciding who we can and can't criticize, but then again, I am also providing depth, research, and nuance to the videos that I'm putting out. I'm also not trying to say any
I think even if people had a platform to talk about certain things 10, 15 years ago, it wouldn't have been the same as now. I don't think it's just because they have access to internet that we are the way, like, that we are like this. I think people literally have changed. There's something changed. Like, something is different. People were different before, and that's that. Like, people still had a voice back then. That didn't. If they wanted to complain, they would have complained. So I don't know.
Or movie should be canceled, deplatformed, or lose sponsorship or business opportunities. Also, if you look at the positives, the exact opposite can happen. A movie or comedian that is overlooked by the mainstream or considered problematic could actually be really funny, and there will be online praise for it. A telltale sign is when the tomato meter from expert critics is super low, but the popcorn meter, which is fan reviews, is high. However, as we know, most of the problems don't come from people giving genuine, nuanced criticism, but rather those who get their fix by causing outrage. Someone can straight up sit in a theater on the night of release and live tweet how funny a movie is. You'll see zero effort Twitter rage baiters go viral with vague tweets like, "I can't believe y'all think this is funny," or "this is problematic," which seems easy to ignore, but it will genuinely make someone think, "Damn, I guess I shouldn't go see this movie," or "Am I a bad person for thinking this is funny?" And because social media rewards outrage, this can snowball into proof that the comedian, actor, or producer is a terrible person who is somehow unworthy of ever working again. People will read critical tweets with
People should think for themselves.
Hundreds of thousands of likes, and they might disagree with what the people are saying, but because it has so much engagement and so many likes, it makes people change their opinions, change their minds. Maybe this isn't funny. Maybe I shouldn't think this is funny. And before you know it, there is an all-out online war over what was meant to be a joke.
You got this whole other wave where, like, now you have these people who put themselves in the oddest position of being the curators of what was kind or unkind. This was okay, but this wasn't, or I cringe when I look back at this. It's like crazy. I think those are sometimes the cringiest.
The purveyor of
what is funny or what isn't. Like, comedy's a big tent.
It's ever evolving. It's not to be dictated.
Right. There's no one way to the waterfall. It's a crazy idea that does it up and say, here's how you do comedy. It's like, you know, you got slipping on a...
Yes, people should be truth seekers who don't celebrate on a... who don't put celebrities on a pedestal like gods who can't say things that aren't wrong. Like me and you.
flipping on a banana peel to,
right.
you know,
It's totally
odd
true.
conversations to,
Right.
you know, there's a wide range of what people find to be funny. And it's like almost like people that would like sit and overanalyze a situation to the point of making themselves feel really good about themselves.
And while you might think all of this is just easy to ignore, it's social media, it's not real, just make the movie, right? Well, it's evident that major studios are a little hesitant to release a comedy with edgy or politically incorrect humor. However, actor Seth Rogen disagreed with this notion during an interview with Esquire magazine. The complaint that comedy is
I love Seth Rogen. Oh my gosh, I love him. Love him. Him, James Franco, the Asian dude, and like a bunch more. Oh my gosh, I love them. They're so funny. Thinking is hard. Maybe some people just can't think. Thinking is hard. Nah, like for real, like thinking is hard for some people. It sounds like a lot of work. Yeah, for some people it is. It's just like, what is it called? Herd mentality? Yeah. Like, you know, just...
Comedy is harder than it used to be is not a valid complaint. Maybe it was too easy before, and why should it be? Why shouldn't it be hard? I like that my job is hard because I'm trying to do something that requires a huge amount of resources and people's time and energy. What do you wish you could say? What do you feel has been taken from you? It's always funny when people are like, oh, they could never make the Diversity Day episode of The Office today. You can still watch it. I'm constantly meeting teenagers who love Superbad and who think it holds up, and none of them are like, how dare you have said that? And Seth does make some great points here. Studios can still make whatever they want. There's nothing stopping them. And it's not objectively harder to be funny today. It just seems like they are not being honest about what they actually think is funny, which is why these comedy movies come out with boring or sanitized humor. The reason why Superbad holds up is because it was honest about the way many teenage boys think and speak. They are rude, crass, always thinking about sex, insulting each other constantly, distracted in school, thinking about the weekend, and living life like they are invincible.
You just get out of here and we'll talk about this later.
Evan, we're down 2 points.
Calm down, Greg. It's soccer. It's soccer.
You, man. Hey, Greg, why don't you go piss your pants again? That was like 8 years ago. People don't forget.
They call each other gay, sometimes even using the F slur, even though that would widely be considered homophobic and a cancelable offense these days.
It's really messed up. Super gay.
The way they behave and talk is shocking
9, I agree.
and inappropriate, but that's what makes it funny because it is somewhat of a snapshot of reality, with the exception that like just the average teenage boy is not that funny. Now you might think this is problematic behavior, and maybe it is, so maybe the film is just not for you, but some take it one step further. They say a film like this is platforming and promoting this disgusting behavior. We are idolizing these morally bankrupt teenage boys, which will justify their bad behavior and maybe even inspire them to act in such a way. And hey, that could also be true too. But regardless of how you feel, the movie is good because it is honest. They went for it and they doubled down on it, even though it was politically incorrect. A modern version of Superbad wouldn't ever be made because they would be too afraid to offend anyone while providing a somewhat realistic depiction of a teenage boy who is gross and reckless with his words. And even if they did, they would probably add some tertiary character who steps in and tries to correct their behavior or be the voice of reason. Then again, the fear of being canceled is so apparent that studios seem to not even try to make a true comedy anymore. Some of the most highly rated comedy films in the 2020s aren't exactly praised for their straight up funny premises and jokes. Take Don't Look Up, for example. Sure, it has funny moments, but it's a satire about a planet-killing comet that's clearly a metaphor for climate change, media distraction, and problematic politics, setting up the planet for failure. Do these comments look like they are for a comedy movie? I always respect a movie that has the balls to actually show the world ending. Every disaster movie starts with the government ignoring a scientist. We really did have everything, didn't we? Damn, that made me cry. You know what other comedies are extremely popular in the 2020s? Free Guy, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves. Do you notice anything different about these comedy movies? They are superhero movies. And don't get me wrong, they're entertaining, they're fun, but they're not comedies in the traditional sense. We get a lot of these films that are action first with humor as a seasoning, but ultimately, much like every other industry, the true reason why comedy films are not being made like they used to is because of, you guessed it, money. When it comes to movie theater ticket sales and financial performance, comedies have always been risky. While genres like adventure and action can have more of an expected success due to built-in spectacle, global appeal, and merchandising potential, comedies rely almost entirely on the jokes landing. What one person finds hilarious, another might find confusing, offensive, or simply unfunny. Jokes often rely on shared knowledge, references, or social commentary that might not translate across different cultures or
Well, that's normal. You know, that's the whole point. Like, comedy is like kind of like subjective. Like, a group of people is gonna like it and some aren't. That's normal.
age groups. A comedy scene that relies on American pop culture might fall flat for an international audience unfamiliar with these references. And on top of that, there's typically no giant CGI battle or billion-dollar franchise name to fall back on if the audience isn't laughing. Now, back in the day, plenty of comedies were huge financial successes. Meet the Fockers, The Waterboy, Wedding Crashers, 22 Jump Street, all grossing hundreds of millions of dollars in the worldwide box office, whereas others that are still considered good or cult classics underperformed in the box office. Adam Sandler's Billy Madison only grossed $26 million at the box office. Dazed and Confused only earned $8 million. Grandma's Boy, $6 million. And this was at a time when people were still actively going to the theaters. Our last peak in movie theater ticket sales was in 2002 when 1.5 billion tickets were sold. And although these films technically made more money than their budget, film budgets typically refer to production costs only. Marketing and distribution costs, also known as P&A, print and advertising, are handled separately, and these marketing costs can be in the tens of millions. However, where these films made their real money was in DVD sales, also another thing of the past. DVDs, rentals, and cable syndication were the lifeline for comedies that didn't crush it in the theaters. A movie like Billy Madison might have been considered a moderate performer at the box office, but once it hit Blockbuster shelves and played on Comedy Central every other weekend, it became a cultural staple. Those secondary markets gave studios the confidence to take a chance on mid-budget comedies because even if they didn't make their money back in the theaters, there was a high probability the film would eventually find its audience later. That safety net is now gone. Ticket sales are down, physical media sales have plummeted, rentals are practically extinct, and while streaming might seem like a replacement, it doesn't generate anywhere near the same revenue for studios. Once a comedy film drops on Netflix or Hulu, the studio gets its licensing fee and that's it. There's no long tail of DVD sales trickling in for years, no late night TV reruns keeping the movie in circulation, there is no second life. Judd Apatow confirmed this when he said, "After the last writer's strike, it felt like the studios decided not to develop movies. They used to buy a lot of scripts, and they had big teams of people giving notes, and they worked for years with people in collaboration on those scripts. I feel like the studios don't buy as many scripts now. Today, every comedy has to either perform in theaters that are half empty, or immediately crush on streaming, or it's a total loss. So basically, comedy films just can't work in the modern era. Comedians are choosing podcasting and stand-up over film. The toxicity of cancel culture puts comedy films at risk to cause uproar, either immediately or years from now when people just decide the jokes are problematic. And combine that with no multiple streams of revenue to make back the investment, comedy films are a huge risk that most major studios simply aren't willing to take anymore. So you're just gonna have to find something else to laugh at."
That is so sad. Comedy, those movies, they're such like you know when you're young and you're sick and you have like chicken noodle soup and you want to watch something on TV, something comforting, that's what you would put on. Like, there's nothing new in that like genre. I'm saying that wrong, but there's nothing new in that like category. It sucks. I love that whole thing they had going on, but yeah, I hope one day, like, as a society, we can get over our issues and like can start laughing again. You know what I mean?